Uh, Excellent. And a big thanks to Colleen, who is sharing her screen, doing lots of navigation for me today. Thank you so much, Colleen, for your willingness to do that, to keep us on track. Let me go ahead and just introduce myself. My name is Emily. I am the owner and principal at White Hodge HR. I have been in the HR and people operations world for 20 plus years. And my life work is racial justice, and I use HR as the tool to implement that and to live that out. So I'm really excited to be here with you all because you all are doing such important work in our community, and I'm just really grateful to have the opportunity to be with you today. A couple of reminders. At the end, I'm going to have an evaluation. Always welcome your feedback about what I can improve. Secondly, I'm going to be sharing a ton of information with you and documents. So feel free to not take notes if you don't want to take notes, because at the end, we're going to send it all to you anyway. There's going to be a total of about 10 different documents. Some of them are templates, some of them are questions, like lists of questions that you can ask during interviews, all sorts of different things that you'll get access to along with this slide deck and the recording of this. So if you want to review it with folks in your organization, do feel free to do that at the end. So the first training that we did, which was a few weeks ago, was about job descriptions, job postings, and recruiting. And so we're building, and today's workshop is building on that. And we're going to be focusing on the screening process, interview process, and offers. Thanks to all of you for registering and sharing what you really want to get out of this. What a whole bunch of you said is that you really want to walk away with templates, hence the 10 documents that we have to share with you at the end. And the second thing that you said over and over again was that you really wanted to work on making offers and like really get into the nitty gritty of that. And so we're actually going to spend a really big chunk of time on that. So Colleen, if you would bump us to that next slide, you'll see our agenda for the morning, and you're going to see we're going to kind of walk through. So I'm going to talk you through the process of hiring, kind of all the way through from the time of inception, where you decide that you need to hire, all the way through the offer process. And I'm going to show you a template for that. And then we're going to talk about resume review. We're going to talk about phone screening and interviewing. And then you're going to see that we have a really significant chunk around offer and negotiating, because that's what you all said that you wanted to work on. And then we're going to talk about onboarding, and we're going to do a Q&A. So assuming that nobody has questions here, if you do have questions at any time, please just go ahead and unmute yourself. I do my best to like check out what folks are saying in the chat, but I'll be honest, that's not my strong suit when I'm trying to stay focused. So if you have a question, please feel free to jump off mute and ask a question, or drop it in the chat. And if somebody else sees it, if somebody could just alert me, that would be great. All right, so the next slide, Colleen, is our tools and resources. So these are 10 documents that I'm gonna be sharing with you today. So I actually want to just walk you through what each of those are going to be. We're not gonna spend time on all of these today, but I wanted to list them all out for you. Some of them we will go over, others we won't. So we're going to start with the timeline and posting. So like I said, a document that sort of gives you an outline from the very start of a position all the way to the time you make an offer. Then there's going to be some standard phone screening sample questions. There's going to be, oh, awesome. Thanks, Colleen. She's popping them all up for us. That's so great. Excellent. I'm just going to give her a second here to do that. Awesome, thank you. So we'll look through the timeline and postings just a little bit. And then that second document, actually, Colleen, go ahead and just click through them, because you all will get access to all these, and the order isn't particularly important. This is the phone screening document that kind of talks you through like, what is the purpose of phone screening, what methodology I use. You don't have to use my methodology, but I wanted to share it with you just so you could see how I do it. Excellent. Then I actually put together a template offer letter for you where you could actually put in your organization's information and fill all those different things in. Thank you for showing that. Then here is some work that actually Chris Torkelson, she is the other person who is doing some consulting for the network right now as well. This is a document that she put together just around how to review resumes and do phone screenings as well. So you'll see a slightly different approach to it. I wanted to give you more than one so that you can pick and choose. I highly respect Chris's work and think she does a phenomenal job of recruiting. So wanted to share her approach as well. And you'll see in here, she's got like a full document that includes a whole bunch of things, including critical behavior interviewing, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And then she's got those 30 questions not to ask. We're going to address some of the illegal questions and things that you should not ask, but then how to still get the information that you actually want from the question that you're asking. Excellent. Great. Then we've got the phone screening tracking chart. So this is essentially how to keep track of the different folks that you're phone screening to see if they really have the skills that you're looking for. I'm not going to get into that now because we're going to touch in on that a little bit later. And then here's some tips for actually making a verbal offer. Things that you want to consider. And then the really hard part of making offers is also the rejection element. And so there's some tips in there for making a rejection phone call as well, which is, we all know, is not the most fun. Then we're going to talk at a certain point about the core competencies and how to really get at interview questions that really speak to the competency that you're looking for. And so Chris, again, this is a document that Chris had put together previously based on some other work that had been done, but it really helps you narrow down what are the specific skills that you need and then how to ask the questions that relate to those specific skills. Awesome. Then this is the list of questions you're going to get. 30 illegal questions that you do not want to ask and that you do not want your hiring managers to ask, but then questions that will still get you information that is similar to what you're wanting, but finding those answers to those questions in a way that is not going to get you in legal trouble. Awesome. And then we're going to talk specifically about critical behavior interviewing, which is one of the ways to really reduce bias in interviewing. So often when we're hiring people, you know, even just yesterday, I was interviewing somebody and someone on the hiring committee said, I really didn't like her. And that's, I'm going to have a slide later, but really liking or not liking somebody is not a great way to hire. It's really about the skills that you're looking for and being very clear about the skills that you're looking for. Fit is important, but liking or not liking somebody is a bit irrelevant, especially in this market that's so tight and that is really being driven by employees. Great. These are just a handful of things that are related to hiring. There are links, again, that my colleague Chris put together that really address equity in hiring. So we're not going to click through those, but I wanted to provide those for you. And then I think, is that it, Colleen? Excellent. Okay, I think we've gone through them all. Again, you're going to get links to all of these. And I also want to point out that I actually just sent out an email this morning inviting all of you to sign up for technical assistance. And it could be anything in HR, but there's 1 hour slots here in June and July. And if we need more, we'll go into August. But it's really an opportunity for you to get specifically what you need for your organization. So this is general training, general workshop, but technical assistance is where you can really dig into what you specifically want and need as it relates to HR. So there's 1 hour blocks. And if you did not get that email, please email me and let me know, because I want to make sure you have the opportunity to sign up for that. Thank you, Colleen. All right, so we're going to head on to the next slide. All right, so the hiring process is really a 4-part step, and in it is the resume review. So this is assuming you've gotten your job description done, you've put your job postings out in the world, and now resumes are starting to come back in. And you now want to figure out, okay, great, I've got these 20, 30 resumes, and who am I going to invite to a phone screening? And so resume review is the very first thing. And then phone screening is what comes after that. You've sort of whittled it down to, okay, I see, oh, great, thanks, Maggie. I see your chat. I will follow up with you afterwards. Thank you for that. The phone screening is that next layer where it's really figuring out and confirming what you saw on the resume, which is that they have the basic skills. You're assessing to make sure that those core competencies that you identified, they actually have those. Then you move on to interviews. These days, most of them honestly are happening remotely. You can also do them in person. It really depends on the personality and culture of your organization. But what you are trying to do in those interviews is do a deeper dive into the specific skill set and also assess for fit. And then finally, it's that offer stage, which is making it a reality. Colleen, if you wouldn't mind pulling up one more time that timeline, I just want to take a quick minute to show people kind of how long it takes. In an ideal world, I like to have folks have a good solid 3 months to, from start to finish. That is not the reality in today's market because applicants are getting snatched up super quickly. But what I did for you is I put together kind of like a whole template from very start to finish. So it goes all the way from getting your job description drafted and approved, and then moving into that job posting, and then pulling your phone screening questions together, figuring out who's going to be on your hiring committee, determining what your application deadline is going to be. And then, Colleen, if you don't mind, yeah, perfect. Thank you. You read my mind. All the way down to the anticipated start date. So to be honest, that purple box is where I start. Like, okay, this is where I want to end up. Say I want to hire somebody on August 1st, then I work my way backwards to figure out what I need to do in order to hit that timeline. Then that second page is a suggested list. And if you were at the last training, you will see that a lot of these are similar to what I suggested in the last training. But this is just a list of keeping track of all the places that you've posted it. And those green boxes are ones that cost money. And so I just highlighted those so that you'll pay special attention to those if you have budget to be able to post. So you can kind of get a sense for the flow of how it goes all the way from job description to making an offer. And you'll really want to, where the most time is at the beginning, is that preparation stage. So those first few lines of really figuring out your recruiting. And then the interview stage is honestly where things get a little bit hairy because of people's schedules. What I highly recommend is that line that's talks about getting those initial interviews set and complete is actually getting those into people's calendars ahead of time. Just even if you can just put a hold on their calendar, it ends up being really helpful for folks to have a sense of when they might be able to expect that. And it also will help you as you get closer to be able to do that. Thanks, Colleen. We can go back to the deck. Excellent. All right, so let's dig in. Resume review. So the goal of doing resume review is to determine if what you have, if you have a qualified pool of candidates and who you're going to phone screen. So what I like to do is actually have the job posting that lists out the requirements right next to me. I literally will write down the 2 or 3 or 4 requirements. For example, must have 1 to 2 years of experience, must have experience managing, something like that. And I will set it right next to me. And then I tend to start with the resume itself. Cover letters can kind of sway you one way or the other. So I like to read them after the fact. But I like to start with the resume to see, do they actually have the minimum qualifications? Do they have those 1 to 2 years of experience? Do they have management experience, if those are the requirements? And then you're going to sort those into yes, maybe, or no piles. And then what I like to do is get really clear that if I actually mark someone as a no, it's simply because they don't have the exact requirements. This is where bias can really creep in, is that, you see certain things like maybe they went to a fancy school, or maybe they don't have a bachelor's, or maybe whatever. But you got to really look at, what did you say were the requirements? If they have the requirements, they should be in the yes pile. If you're not quite sure, like, do they have the requirements? You put them in that maybe pile. But if they honestly don't have those requirements, you put them in the no pile. Cover letters will sometimes help illuminate, maybe their resume isn't super straightforward and clear, so that it can illuminate that. But you want to be really clear that you are reviewing resumes against the actual qualifications that you put in the job posting. Let's go to a quick scenario. And this one I really am going to ask for participation. So when I'm done reading it, if somebody would be willing to hop off and give me your input, that would be great. So here's the hiring scenario. You're hiring for a direct service position called a senior case manager. You only got 7 applicants since you posted the position 4 weeks ago. A few years ago, you'd get 30 plus applicants for that position, but recently, with the market the way it is, you're only getting 5 to 10 applicants, which makes hiring very challenging. The 2 requirements that you posted on the job posting are 2 to 3 years of direct service experience and a bachelor's degree in social work. Of those 7 applicants, none of them meet the listed requirements. What is your next step? I would love for somebody to jump off mute and give me your input. Anyone, any takers? This is a really hard one. And honestly, this one requires a lot of courage. So I'm hoping
I can answer based
Awesome.
off my experience if
Great.
no one else wants to share. I would go back to the bachelor's degree in social work requirement and rethink, do we actually need a bachelor's degree in social work, or are there other degrees? Because there's not that many bachelor's degrees in social work programs. So you're already looking at a very small pool of people that have that. So maybe it's just a bachelor's degree in social work or related field, and maybe you repost it and maybe you get some more.
Awesome. I love that answer. So
I couple that too.
Great.
With the exception of the direct service experience, I would probably break down specifically what is it that you want this person to be, informed on or have skills in, because direct service is kind of broad as well.
Thank you so much for that. That's super helpful. Anybody else have thoughts? So let's take it one step further. So let's say you rethink the bachelor's requirement and you also get some clarity. What's your next step? Say you decide, nope, we actually decided we don't need a bachelor's. What's your next step in terms of what do you actually do with that pool of 7 people? Anyone?
I'll try to answer, but I don't know if I understand the question. But I hate leaving people hanging. I mean, sometimes I feel like you just have to start talking to people, right? They might not, but I guess, are you wondering how I would choose the people that I would just start talking to, or?
Whatever you think, what would your next step be if you revised your requirements? What would your next step be?
I'd go back and see if now the 7 applicants actually fit the new requirements, but also keeping in mind that you might have some decent candidates there, but if you repost the position with different requirements, then you might get a whole new grouping of folks that you want to talk to as well.
Yeah, great answer, Colleen. Amy, did you want to add anything to that?
No, Colleen is fantastic.
Colleen is fantastic. And that was a great answer. So I would do exactly the two things that she said. Number one, go back and review those seven applicants against your new criteria. And then if you have time and space and resources, I would strongly suggest reposting with the updated requirements, because it will likely, just as it did with your pool of those 7 applicants, it will likely increase the pool of applicants across the board. So excellent. Let's head to the next slide. All right, phone screening. So assuming now you have your pool of resumes, you've gone through, you've got some in your yes pile, you're going to move those folks to a phone screening. And the goal here is to determine if they really do have those essential skills that they listed on their resume that look good on paper. But now you're going to have a conversation with them to figure out, do they actually have those skills? So it introduces you to the human behind that resume. It gives you the opportunity to interact a little bit. And what I highly recommend is that you ask the same questions of every candidate. What I do is I have, and you'll see that in when we get to those documents, but I have the core questions that I'm going to ask of every applicant, no matter what. Then if during the course of that time that we're talking, it looks like they're a good fit, I have a secondary set of questions that might take it deeper. And then, you know, obviously you want to let the conversation go where it's going to go. Say, for example, a candidate asks a really insightful question and it kind of leads you down another trail. Do feel free to do that, but you really want to stick to your script, because you really want to identify, do they have the skills to move forward? So Colleen, if you wouldn't mind sharing Chris's phone screening tracking chart, that would be great. Excellent. So here's what you can see. So the pre-work that you would do for a phone screening is you would actually identify the core skills that you need and the questions that you're going to ask to get at those core skills. So this is based on, I believe, from what I see, it was some sort of a development position that Chris was interviewing for or phone screening for. And it asks things like, you know, how did you hear about us? What kind of administrative experience do you have? So this, again, gives them a chance to illuminate what's on their resume. Specifically, do they have nonprofit or shelter experience? Anyway, you can go through the list, but what you're going to do is in each of those columns, you're going to mark yes, no, maybe, because you really want to identify which skills they have the strengths in. And so you're actually going to have this document open, or you can or cannot, but you're going to have this document open. And when you're talking to Dominique, you know, who's applicant number 1, then in column number 1, you would actually put Dominique's name and you would say, you know, yes, they had this or strong, but this is where you can kind of keep some notes to understand their depth of understanding of each of these different skill-based questions that you're going to ask. Excellent. Let's jump to the next slide here. So, pro tip. Excellent. So to increase equity, I like to share screening questions ahead of time. I like to share them at least one day in advance so that folks have time to put their thoughts together and really come and put their best foot forward. So the feedback that I get from candidates is they love it. I've been doing it for years. Across the board, they love it. They feel like it really makes the interview less nerve-wracking. It makes them feel like they can arrive with stronger level questions. The feedback that I get from folks who kind of come from an outdated mentality will say things like, yeah, but don't we want them to think on our feet? If thinking on your feet is a core part of the job, for instance, if you're hiring a stand-up comedian, then yes, absolutely, they need to think on their feet. But if you're looking for an administrator who's methodical and tedious in how they document information or whatever, that's not a core competency. That you actually don't need that at all. And so this is really a way that you can increase equity across the board, is to give applicants the opportunity to really knock your socks off. Let's bump to that next slide. And again, just a reminder that the goal of the phone screening is to really assess what was on paper and to see if they meet those essential skills and basic requirements. Let's go to that next slide. Yeah, pro tip, watch for your own bias. This is really when you can get into saying things like, oh, I like them a lot, or I didn't like them. Stick to the facts of what you heard. It's really easy to be tired in the afternoon, you haven't gotten your morning coffee, you're personally grumpy, you're having an off day. It's really easy to take your experience and to impose it on the person that you're interviewing. So I just strongly recommend that you really stick to the facts, especially up until this point. You're going to be assessing for fit later, but you really, at this point, you're really looking at skills. All right, next slide. No illegal questions, please. Please don't ask anything about protected statuses. Those are kind of the same things that you'll find in your harassment statement or your anti-harassment policy, sorry. Things like race, gender, national origin, parental status, relationship status, all those sorts of things. Don't ask anything about any of those things because it's, number one, it's not job related. Number two, it's illegal. Draft your questions ahead of time and stick to it. I can't say this enough. It's so easy to go off script and get sidetracked. And also it saves you a lot of anxiety in the interview process. You can focus because you're prepared. So questions to avoid. This is just a small list. I'm going to give you a big list, or Chris has given you a long list. Where are you from? Don't ask it. Do you have kids? How much were you making? This one specifically is illegal in Illinois. You cannot ask what people were making at their last job. You know, anything about religion or age, anything about, you know, supervising folks of other genders, anything about drug use, or how many sick days somebody used last year. Colleen, if you can pop open those 30 questions again, that would be great. Thank you again, Colleen, for navigating all of this. This is a lot. I appreciate it. So 30 illegal questions. Let's go down to age, because like mine is obvious. I have a full head of gray hair. Don't ask me how old am I. If you're trying to understand my actual job related experience, you know, ask me what my long-term career goals are. You can ask, are you over the age of 18? Meaning, are you allowed to work? That sort of thing. Marital and family status, that's a great one. Instead of asking, do you have kids? You just ask, you know, what's your experience working with specific age group? But only ask that question if it's actually related to the job. So for instance, if you're hiring somebody to work with teenagers, feel free to ask, you know, what's your experience working with teenagers? But if you're really trying to get information about their family status, that's actually quite inappropriate, and please don't do it. You can see, you know, there's a whole bunch of different questions outlined here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just wanted to give you a chance to see what some of those questions are. Please share this with your hiring managers. You really don't want them to get you into hot water in terms of hiring. All right, so we're going to pop back and we're going to do another hiring scenario, and I'm going to ask for input again. So if you would be willing to come off mute when I'm done reading it, that would be great. So, all right, you've done all your work. Now you're at the interview process, and during the course of an in-person interview with the hiring committee, Dominique, your top candidate, who we've mentioned before, discloses that they're pregnant and expecting their first baby next year. They express their concern about how this could affect their chances of getting the job. Understandable, it's a thing. Your hiring committee member, Jane, congratulates Dominique and then asks Dominique when exactly the baby is due. What's your next step? What is your next step? What are you gonna do? This is a really awkward one, but it's super real. That's why we're practicing.
appropriate to go into like what kind of benefits you offer in terms of, since they disclose that they are pregnant, like what kind of benefits you offer in terms of like family leave, or in terms of like possibly insurance, you know, anything like that? Would that be appropriate?
Totally appropriate. And I would explicitly say, Dominique, thank you for sharing that. We're not going to talk about that because that's actually protected information. I would explicitly say we're not going to talk about the details of that because that's your personal private information. But then what you just said is perfect. Let's talk about the benefits that we have to support a parent or a pregnant person. That's awesome. Curious what y'all would do after the meeting.
Probably remind Jane that that's inappropriate.
Exactly. I'd pull Jane aside and say, hey, Jane, I know you weren't trying to, you know, do whatever, give Jane the benefit of the doubt, but just a reminder, like that's totally off limits and we can't ask those kind of questions. Awesome. Good job. All right. If you got some water, go ahead and take a sip of water. You got to stay hydrated. These days are so hot. All right, we're going to jump into behavioral interviewing, and let's talk just a second about behavioral interviewing. All right, behavioral interviewing is a really beautiful, wonderful, structured approach that's built on research that basically says past behavior predicts future behavior. So in a behavioral interview, you are asking the candidate to provide concrete examples about how they used specific behaviors or skills on the job. This is a great way to keep bias out of hiring. Sorry, Colleen, I'm having a hard time finding my words again. Could you share Chris's critical behavioral interviewing guide one more time? Awesome, thank you so much. So that first paragraph gives you kind of some details about what it's like, what the methodology is, blah, blah, blah. Let's look at number 5. So when you're thinking about what are the skills that you actually need this person to have to do, for instance, they need to take initiative, they need to take ownership, they need to think critically, they need to be adaptable, and they need to be an effective communicator. So like those are the 5 things that we're looking for. So then if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see there's examples about how to get to those specific skill sets. So one of those was taking ownership. So you're going to ask a question, tell me about a time when you worked with others in an organization to get something done. Walk me through specifically what you did. So this is a great opportunity to find out, do they actually know how to take ownership or not? And then you just can circle, are you confident that they have this skill? It's possible that they have this skill, or it's doubtful that they have this skill. But this gives you like really specific ways to, number 1, find questions that are appropriate for the skills that you're looking for, and then whether or not you're confident they actually have those skills. Let's scroll down a little bit more because there's some other great information. Then you want to, this is extra. This is extra credit, not necessary for phone screening or for interviews. But like if there are things that you as an organization have decided, look, we're all about passion in our mission. You can't work here if you don't have passion for our mission, or maturity is required. Those are things you kind of want to identify ahead of time, but not like spring onto your hiring committee in the middle of an interview. If there are those things that are important to you collectively as an organization, you want to identify those things ahead of time. And then let's scroll down just a little bit more. And then here's just 50 more questions that Chris put together that you can pull from. So if there are specific things that you're looking for, here's just a boilerplate of questions that you can utilize. So we can go back to the deck. Colleen, thank you so much for that. So in an interview, in an interview, the goal is really to drill down into those skills that you've agreed upon ahead of time that you really need, and determine if it's the right fit for the position. So you get to connect with the hiring manager, and the candidate get to connect together. The hiring committee, if you have one, also can offer input, and that you really want to use these behavioral questions, drawing on what they've done in the past to see if you think they actually have those skills. All right, I'm going to pause and just see, because now we're moving into that offer and negotiation, which was what a whole bunch of people said they wanted to do. But before we get to the offer and negotiation, does anyone have any questions that you would like heard right now?
I had a question real quick. You mentioned a hiring committee. What is an ideal size for a hiring committee, do you believe?
Great question. It depends on the position. If it's for a high level position, I would suggest 4 or 5. So, and what I mean by high level is like if it's for a deputy position or a senior director or something like that, that's going to need to be working with people across the organization. I would say 4 or 5. If it's for something that's a little bit lower, like manager through, associate, coordinator, manager, I think 2 or 3 is totally fine. I like to have at least 3 because 3 can break a tie, but also you want to pull in people who are going to work closely with them. So I think it really can range. I tend to think anything over 5 is total overkill. And it's just way too intimidating for somebody who's interviewing, unless it's like an executive director. I tend to think 2 or 3 is really kind of the sweet spot for most positions.
Great, thank you so much.
Sure. Any other questions before we jump into the offer? Ooh, got it. I see. Any suggestions for behavioral questions for individuals without much work experience? That's a great question. So I would go to that list of the skills that you need, and I would identify. So I'm assuming this is for an entry-level position where, maybe a lot of experience isn't necessary. And let me just ask, Pat, is that correct? Is this for an entry-level position?
Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yes, it would be, or it could be for someone who has mostly like internship experience, just not much. Maybe they're just starting out looking for in their career.
Got it. That's great, because I think that's really real, and a lot of us are hiring entry-level folks. I would ask them to draw on, it could be from school, it could be from an internship, but I would still ask them to draw on their past history. I mean, everybody's had experience either taking ownership for something. It could have been, like at a club that you were in high school or wherever. Like, they can come up with some sort of an example to still answer the question that doesn't even necessarily have to be work related. But I would definitely ask them to draw on past experience. And if it's obvious that they're struggling with it, I might just let them know and be explicit. Hey, lots of experience with this particular thing is not required, but we do want to know how you've handled this type of a situation, in a different context, and that's totally fine.
Thank you.
Hey, Emily. So I know you said you like to give the phone screening questions in advance to people. Do you ever give some of the interview questions to folks before the actual interview?
I do. I always do. Personally, my personal ethic is that I like to build in as much equity as possible. So if I have any say in the hire, I always give interview questions, including final interviews ahead of time, unless one of the core competencies that they need to have is being able to think on their feet, which honestly, in nonprofit world, might be your executive director and might be a development type of person. But by and large, in my opinion, most jobs do not require thinking on your feet in this kind of a way. So I always give questions ahead of time. Plus, it forces you to do your homework ahead of time and know what your questions are, and to not show up to the interview unprepared. So. Cool. Any other questions before we head into offer and negotiating? Cool.
Do you
All right.
also, sorry, I got one more question. Do you suggest that the person who does the initial screening of the resumes and the phone screening questions has to also be on the interviewing?
You know,
And do you have more than one set of like interviews? Like,
great question. So different organizations do it different ways. Different positions require different amounts of, like what I would require in terms of number of interviews would be completely different for like, say, a case manager versus an executive director. Like a case manager, I think a phone screening and an initial interview is just fine. I also think adding in one more interview is also fine, but definitely for, you know, somebody at a lower position on the org chart, I don't think any more than a phone screening plus 2 interviews. I think that's overkill. Really, the higher you get on an org chart, I think it's more likely because people, you know, who are at like, say, a director level or a VP level are, excuse me, going to need to be interfacing with a lot more people across the organization. And so in that instance, I say do as many interviews as you need to do. My caveat to that is in this environment, people are getting snatched up so quickly that I would have your stuff, if you are going to need to have more than 2 interviews, I would say plan that stuff out really thoughtfully and ahead of time, because you don't want to lose out your top candidates because it's just taking you a long time to get it all in. Did I answer your whole question? I can't remember.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Great. All right. So we're going to head on to offer and negotiating. So this is a little bit more intense in terms of what I've got on the slide here. So a couple of things to think about beforehand. I'm going to reiterate what I said in my last training. I think that it is a matter of ethics, and I stand by it, and I do it with, I will not recruit for positions that do not post their salary range. I don't think it's ethical. And I think it's really important in terms of promoting equity to make sure that people know what it is that you are asking them to do and the dollar amount that you're asking them to do it for. Everyone is heading this way. If you are not posting your salary ranges, honestly, you're woefully behind the times, and it's really important for you to catch up because you're going to lose out on a lot of people. That's my soapbox. I will move on from that. But consider if you want to become a non-negotiating organization. For example, you're not going to offer anyone that you're hiring new above your salary band 2, for instance. Like you've got grade 2, lane 2, you know, however your salary chart works, but you as an organization have decided ahead of time, we're only going to offer between the first lane and the second lane or something like that, or band 2. But deciding as an organization what you're going to do, because unfortunately, the way that society has been set up is that we are requiring people to negotiate when negotiating is never part of their actual job. It's not part of what they actually need to be skilled at doing. And so we've got wild equity issues because some people know how to negotiate and other people don't. But if that's not part of the job, don't make folks do it. So just consider that. Consider if you want to become a non-negotiating organization. There are pros and cons to it. I'm not going to get into it today, but if that's something you would like to talk more about, I'm happy to talk with you about it. Second thing, decide ahead of time who's going to make reference calls, if you do reference calls, and who will make the verbal and written offers. Typically, if you're making reference calls, that's typically going to be your hiring manager. And the verbal offer is typically going to be the hiring manager or the person who's going to supervise this person. The written offer, if you have an HR or operations department, it's usually going to come from there because you want them all to be standard. You want all offer letters to include the exact same things with the exact same template so that there's just real equity in how you're doing that. Then you want to get pre-approved for the dollar amount that you're planning to offer. And for sure know what your maximum is, know exactly what you're authorized to spend up to so that you don't have to, you know, do ping pong to try to figure out what you can do and what you can't do. And then be sure that your offer is in line with your compensation philosophy, and that your values are in line with what you're offering. Because equity, like I just keep saying it, but equity is really important. Having people, being paid similar amounts for similar work is just really important. Then you want to get acceptance of that verbal offer first. So we'll get a little bit more into those specifics, but you want to make sure that you get a verbal offer before you go ahead and do the written offer, but make sure that you've got that offer template ready to roll, especially in this market. I can't tell you how many people have flown off between the time we made a verbal offer and got it in writing. If you don't have that ready to go, you may lose out on people. And then once you have that verbal from the candidate, get that written offer out within 1 business day, max. Like I honestly would coordinate with the person who's in charge of that, and I would actually have it out within the hour in this market. And then once offer letters are signed, get those declination letters or emails out to other finalists. Here's my rule of thumb. If, say you've got 2 finalists, 1 accepts your verbal offer, once they sign it, then call that other person. If you've had an interview with somebody, give them the courtesy of a call, not just an email. Emails are fine for folks who didn't make it to phone screening or maybe didn't make it past the first interview, but you really want candidates to walk away with a positive taste in their mouth about your organization, because word does spread. And the other thing that I say will leave a really, really negative taste in people's mouths is if they never hear back from you. And so please do take time to respond to people who have taken the time to apply for that position. All right. Next slide, Colleen. So the job offer template, which we'll pull up in a minute, there are some essentials that you must have in it. One is the address block and the title, and the date, the title of the position that you're offering, the salary. You want to break it down into 2 different things. You want to annualize it. So that's like, $56,000, whatever. But then you also want to list it out per pay period. The reason for this is that there have been some legal situations that have been ruled on where all that was listed in the salary or in the salary offer was just the annual. And so even if somebody only worked 3 weeks and then they quit, they still got the full annual amount. So what you want to say is it's this much per pay period. And if annualized, it would be that big bucket of money. Number 4, you want to do that start date. And if you have an expiration, like if you give them 24 hours to sign it, you want to make sure to include that in the offer letter. Any benefit details, list as many as you can to make it as rich of an offer as you can. If there's any contingencies, like if it's contingent on passing a background check or, I don't know that many of you need to pull, transcripts, but if that's something that you do have to do for your funders, make sure to list that. You want to include that at-will paragraph, just stating that Illinois is an at-will state, that you're an at-will employer. Then you want to give them someone to contact. So it might be somebody different than the hiring manager. It could be your HR person, your ops person, say you're out on vacation, but basically you want to make sure they have someone to contact on site, and then a signature and date line. Colleen, if you don't mind popping us over to that document. Awesome. So this is basically what I just walked you through. And all those yellow blobs are for you to put in your organization's information. So basically I created it so that you could literally just drag and drop and put your information in there. I don't think we need to go over it. What I will say, in today's world, please use PDF signing. Please don't mail this out. That's so archaic, or email it. I mean, yes, email it as a PDF for them to sign, but please do use PDF and have it electronically signed so that it can go into effect immediately. There's so many people who don't have printers, scanners, whatever at home. So please spend the few extra dollars that it takes to have PDF and make sure that this is a signable document so that you can run with it. Also, it's a huge red flag to folks if you don't have PDF. They're like, whoa, what century are you working in? And you might even lose good people. In this market, it wasn't like that maybe a year ago, but in this market, it's a huge red flag to folks if you don't have some of those like really important current capabilities. So, all right, now we're gonna be jumping into a peer skill practice. A whole bunch of you said that you actually wanted to practice making an offer. So what you're gonna do is I'm gonna put you into breakout rooms. You're gonna do introductions, 1 minute each, keep it quick, keep it short. And then you're gonna do a verbal offer. You're gonna practice calling the candidate to make an offer. Here's what you're gonna do in your practice call. You're gonna share your excitement. You're gonna share any specific things that made you want to select them. Feel free to also ask for feedback about their experience and their reason for wanting to join your organization. The thing I try to remind folks is they're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. And even when you make an offer, they may not want your offer. So ask for that kind of feedback so that you're getting real-time information about how your organization is being perceived. And then share the actual details of the offer, the pay scale, the budget, anything that would illuminate, why it is that you're making the offer that you're making. And then discuss the potential start date. Make sure that they are clear about when they would need to start, or, ask them if they've got any upcoming vacations or time off. Like really make it into an opportunity to get clear about potential start date. Also know ahead of time if you can negotiate that, or if you just really need them to start ahead of time. If that's the case, you will want to make sure that they have actually heard that information prior. You don't want to spring that on them. And then practice sharing next steps with either a written offer, onboarding details, background check, all that kind of stuff. So you've done your introductions with your pair. You're going to practice actually giving the verbal offer. I invite you, if you've got a position open now that you're working on, feel free to check that out or use that as your example. And then share feedback with each other about what you think that your partner did well, or where you think they might want to consider making an adjustment. So I am going to jump over into the breakout rooms. Let's see, there are. Okay, I think. Okay, I'm going to break you out and I will give you the time warning when it's time to swap partners. So you'll have 2 minutes to introduce yourselves. And then when the 6 minutes have been done for the first person, I'll give you that heads up. All right, have fun.
Do you want to stop recording?
Yes, please. I will. Thank you for that. Oh, excellent. All right, we're going to head into some question time. And while we do that, I am also going to remind you that there is technical assistance available that has been paid for by the network. I just dropped the link in. If you want to actually take a minute and sign up, feel free to do that. The other thing that we're going to ask you to do in these last few minutes is fill out an evaluation of today's training. So Colleen, I don't know if you have the link to that and want to drop that in, but those are 2 invitations while we're doing some Q&A. If anybody has questions, feel free to just jump off mute and ask away.
I'll ask a question, of
Great.
course. If you're making an offer and the person says, I want to think about it, how long do you usually give them to think about it and get back to you?
Yeah, great question. If it's a Friday, I tell them they have until like 11 on Monday morning. And if it's a weekday and you want to be really generous, I give them 48 hours, but I usually give, I personally give 24 hours. People have a sense if they want to work with you. And honestly, by the time you get to a final offer, you usually have an idea of whether or not somebody somebody just started working in the neighbor's yard and it got really loud. I don't know if you all can hear it, but it got me. So in a nutshell, what I was saying is, yeah. What were we talking
And then during that time, like either 24 or 48 hours
Yes.
or the weekend, during that time, you wouldn't send over an offer in writing. You would wait still until they came back to you.
I would wait until they give you a verbal offer or a verbal acceptance. Yes, that's what I would do. I would have it prepared and ready to go, but I would wait until they verbally accept it, just so that because what you don't want to do is have an offer out to them and then they get back to you and say, no, I don't want it, and then not be able to make an offer to your second candidate. Because while it's out there in the world, you don't want to have two out there at the same time, in a nutshell. Sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
And then following up on that, like some folks in the past for me have wanted to see some things in writing. Like sometimes folks would be like, can you give me more details about your health insurance plan? Because that makes a difference to me, you know?
Such a great question. So one of the things that I'm really happy to help people with in terms of technical assistance is exactly that sort of thing. What I do when I have worked at different organizations is I actually have a benefits one pager that lists out really clearly, like what percentage of your, well, number one, what kind of plan do you have? What percentage of it do you pay? What auxiliary benefits do you have? What does your PTO or vacation package look like? I list out all those sorts of things on a one pager because you absolutely want to send that over. In fact, thank you, Colleen, for asking that question, because I would actually send that to them when I make the verbal offer. Like I would just say, hey, just so that you can add this into your thinking, here's the one pager of everything that we offer in addition to salary, so that they can consider that as they're thinking about their verbal offer. Great question. I'm curious, what throughout this process in this moment has been the most challenging for you all? Like between screening resumes, interviews, offers, where is the hitch these days?
I think, well, for us, I know we've had positions open for quite a while. But I think it's one of the main things, it's, of course, the salary. As transparent as we are, we always include the salary range and the benefits, because there's always, there's candidates that always want more than what we offer.
Yep. Yeah, that's super real. I was really glad to see that your organization's got that extra money just recently, because that's going to make a really significant difference. Because just getting applicants, I saw, Pat, your note in there too, that getting applicants has been really challenging. That's what I'm seeing across the board in the nonprofit, especially for some of those lower paid positions. So that's super real.
And if folks weren't able to come to the first session, in the follow-up email with all of these resources, we can also resend the link to the first session about recruiting.
Thank you. Latasha, I saw your question in the chat. Any suggestions on open positions over 90 days? Yeah, maybe suggestions on a plan of action. Such a great question. There's a few things that I would do. Number one, I would look at the title and make sure that it makes sense out in the world. Sometimes we have internal titles that aren't what's popular or the norm or kind of what's out there today. So sometimes something as simple as changing a title can matter. Second, I would look at your job posting and make sure that there's a really strong, compelling reason why somebody would want to apply. In the last training that I did, I included a section about like the about you. Here's what we're looking for. Does this sound like you section? And making sure that that's really strong. And then in terms of other things, I would look at your recruiting plan. I would revisit it. Have you posted it everywhere that makes sense? Have you gotten it out to all the networks? Can you think of any more networks? Is there any way to increase the budget of where you're posting it? But I would honestly say, based on what I'm seeing and all the folks that I'm talking to who are currently recruiting, it really comes down to salary and benefits. And so I would say, you know, look at the title, look at the, you know, the compelling statement to get somebody to apply, and look where you're posting it. But then really at the end of the day, it's really about bringing your salaries up when possible, because that is what is driving today's market. And I wish there was something more magical, but there's really not. That's really what we're seeing. Like for instance, I am seeing first-time managers who are fresh out of college expecting and getting $70,000 for nonprofit work. And so, which I have never seen before in my career. And so the market is just really competitive. So if any work that you need to do to get your salaries, especially that floor raised, is the work that I would start with. Great question. I know we're in our last 6 minutes. I'm still happy to take questions, but I want to invite you to those 2 links. So one, please do evaluate today's. I'm always trying to improve and make trainings more, you know, meaty and attainable. And the second thing is, if you want to sign up for technical assistance, that is out there. And again, it is prepaid. And then I see Colleen shared all those forms that are available to you, and we will send out an email after this as well with all the information. I'll send you the recording, this deck, and all those documents that we kind of went through. We do have 5 more minutes, so I'm happy to take any last minute questions. And I'm also happy to give you 5 minutes of your life back. I will not be offended if you jump off at this point, but I'm happy to stay on as long as folks want to. Let's see. Great. I see there's a request for us to resend out the last one as well. Yep, you got it. Great. Thanks, Colleen, for sharing that folder with all the resources.
I hope that one works. If not, it'll be in the email. So I wonder if I need to change the settings.
Bye, Andrea. Thanks for being with us today. Appreciate you. Bye, Anna. See you later. Any last minute questions before we stop recording? All right, hearing none, I'm gonna stop, and yeah, feel free to reach out anytime. Appreciate it.